Hey, Merry Christmas, Bible nerds. My name is Jesse, and I'm the lead pastor of Carpenter's Way Church right here in Groves. And I want to tell you the day that I became a Bible nerd. I was about 17 years old, and I had a lot of questions. I was really skeptical of the faith. Prior to that, I think I've made some Sunday school teachers quit with my incessant asking of questions. But I was actually coming at it from a place of curiosity. I really wasn't trying to make people cry. And at 17 years old, I come to my pastor with a question that I was pretty sure was bigger than the Christian faith could handle. And he patiently answered my question, pointed me to new resources. We began exploring C.S. Lewis and Mere Christianity. And what I found, not only was the Christian faith able to handle this super big question that I wasn't really able to handle, but underneath that answer are 10 more questions. And then underneath that, each of those is 10 more questions, that the well is deep and you never get to the bottom. That's what our Latin forefathers said several hundred years ago. They had a Latin phrase for it. They said that the Bible had a sensus plenior, I think is how you pronounce it. It means fuller meaning, that unlike any other book that's ever been created, you can keep digging into this thing and you never get to the bottom. What I want to do today is I want to look at a couple of characters that are very common in our Christmas stories, and just try to unpack like what's underneath that rock. Because if you read the book of Matthew, the drama ramps up. It's like, hey, Jesus was born. Let's introduce you to a guy named Herod, and now he's killing all the kids. And it's like it goes so fast, doesn't it? And we either approach it from two extremes. One is these people are completely foreign to us, and so I'm going to keep reading, but I don't really understand. The other extreme is we've heard the Christmas story so many times, we're familiar with Herod and the wise men because we have heard it so many times, and therefore we don't ask the question. So let's just pause and let's dig under the rock and see where we're at. I'm going to read the first opening bits of Matthew chapter 2, and let's see what we learn about these characters. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, that is in Greek magi, so we'll use the term interchangeably today, magi and wise men, from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. The wise men show up, they go to the king's house because they're looking for a king who was born. Herod has no idea who this guy is. So verse 3, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, which is a curious response. If you're the king of the Jews and you're hearing about Messiah coming, that shouldn't be troubling to you, but he was. And it says that he was troubled, but all Jerusalem with him, because where the leader goes, so do the people as well. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And so you guys know the story. The story continues where the wise men make it to Bethlehem. They find baby Jesus in the family. They worship him. They give him the gifts, and then they depart a different way, and Herod loses his mind. Why is Herod so worked up in this story? I want to rewind the clock, because there is this really weird 400 years right before this moment that the Bible is silent. If you go through the Old Testament, you get to the book of Malachi. That was written in about 420 BC, and then nothing until Matthew. And so if you're just reading the Bible straight through, you just skipped 400 years of history. And it happens to be the 400 years of history that all of our historians love, and all of our, our books look at, like the movie Gladiator would have fallen in that. So what's happening in those 400 years? Well, right before Malachi is written, the Persians and the Medes have, Cyrus the Great, have released the Jewish people out of exile back to Jerusalem to begin to rebuild. So that was when the second temple was built. The reason why that's important for the story is because there's a Greek historian named Herodotus that says that the Magi was a tribe of the Medes. And so that puts them geographically in that area, that their people group was a part of the people that were oppressing the Jewish people 400, 500 years before this moment, but have now switched roles. That's an interesting piece of history. In that 400-year gap, you have Alexander the Great conquering the world, Hellenizing the world, bringing the Greek culture to the world. And then the Romans rise up in power and take over all of the Greek territories. And so now you have the Romans coming to power. And as the Romans were coming to power, they looked at Jerusalem and they're like, hey, we need to put our thumb down on these people. And so you have a guy by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, and then you have the Maccabean revolt in response to that. And so after the Maccabean revolt, you have the family of the Maccabeans. They're known as the Hasmoneans, the Hasmonean dynasty. They are the rulers of Jerusalem. At first, they were rulers just by reputation. They were heroes. But then, one guy stands up, he's like, hey, I'm a priest now. Then a generation later, well, I'm the high priest. And a generation later, well, I'm the king. And so they just kept kind of ramping it up as time went on. But that was about 167 BC was the Maccabean revolt. So now we're getting a little closer. Fast forward, the Romans are kind of conquering things. Julius Caesar is now emperor. And then he's assassinated. He's assassinated in 40 BC. And it's in that assassination that the Roman government goes into civil war. And so all of these foreign territories, including Israel, Jerusalem, they're sort of in turmoil because the Roman government, who's been keeping them safe, is now focusing on who's going to become the next Caesar. And it's in that window, it's in that chaos that Herod the Great and his family travel to Rome, travel to the Senate, and they say, listen, we know that you've got a lot on your plate. Let me be king of the Jews. I will rule on your behalf. You just put me in power. We'll make sure everything stays in peace. And that's when Herod the Great becomes king over the Jews in 37 BC. He pushes out the Hasmoneans. He pushes out the priests, and he's the king. And so now you have like competing rulership happening in Jerusalem. Early in King Herod's career, he needs to get political favor. So he rebuilds the temple. He makes it magnificent. It takes him 46 years to complete what becomes the temple that Jesus will walk in later. In fact, this birth story is happening in the middle of that construction project. Herod the Great also brings in roads, he brings in aqueducts, and he makes sure that the place is secure. For Herod the Great, his peace is predicated on how well he can pacify Rome. And so even though he's a Jew, and even though he should be looking for the Messiah, he stopped looking. In fact, the hint that Messiah is coming, the hint that the Lord is going to be fulfilling those prophecies that they haven't heard from the Lord in the last 400 years, but he remembers those prophecies. That hint is a threat to the stability that Herod the Great has built. And so in his court walks these magi, these Medes. They come in and they say, hey, we heard that the Christ was born. We want to go worship him. Where is the king of the Jews? And it triggers this thought in Herod. He wasn't even looking for Messiah. So he asks his wise men, his own wise men, and they go find him. What we see is that in this drama are groups of people that are full of knowledge, and yet they're not looking. And then another group of people that they're really wise, but they have just one speck of knowledge. Where does that knowledge come from? Where did the Magi know about this prophecy of the Christ? It could be from the time of the Jews being in exile and just the writings being there. There's also a hint that way back in Numbers, there's a prophecy that Balaam gives when he's accidentally trying to curse the Jews. And he can't, and so he keeps blessing them over and over again. And in his last prophecy, this is what Balaam tells his king. And this is rewinding the clock another 500 years. He says, and now, this is, by the way, Numbers 24. I'm going to start reading in verse 14. And now, behold, I am going to my people. So this is Balaam. He's like, I'm going home. I'm going home, but before I go, I have something to say. Come, I will let you know what this people will do to your people in the latter days. Hey, king, I know you wanted me to curse Israel, but let me let you know what they're going to do in the latter days. And so he begins this prophecy. And he took up his discourse and said, the oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Sheth. Balaam, way back then, prophesies about a star and a conqueror who's going to come and overthrow Moab and Sheth. The Magi would have been representatives of those people, and the way that Messiah conquered them wasn't by force, but by receiving them and by forgiving them, by giving them a place to worship. The Christmas message, as Matthew unfolds it, is a story of people who should have been close to Messiah and looking for him, but weren't, and people who had no business being near Messiah and sought him and were received. The Christmas story has this back and forth of this guy, Herod, has the right pedigree, but he refuses the blessing. He refuses the hope. And then the Magi have no claim to the hope, and yet were received. Herod has all the right knowledge, and he resists the Messiah. And the Magi had just a fraction of the knowledge, just the smallest piece, and it was enough to drive their heart to go worship the Christ. As we wrap up, I just want to tell you, Bible nerds, if I can call you that, as a fellow Bible nerd, I think I can, knowledge is great. And there's no end to what we can study in the Word of God, and He meets us day after day in our studies. You continue to look for the question under the last answer that you received, and you dig down and enjoy it. But be careful not to make the mistake that Herod and his people were making, that in all of this knowledge, it gives us a map of where to go, but it doesn't take the steps for us. And so as we approach Christmas, let me encourage you that you guys are studying the map so well, and continue that. I love the work you're doing. I love seeing it. And my encouragement to you is that you would take steps along that map, chasing after Messiah, no matter how far it takes you, to worship at his feet, and you'll be received. And also to remember this other fact, that even people who are not studying the Bible, who are not Bible nerds, if you will, who are far from the Lord and have just a fraction of the knowledge, it just takes one little seed, and then the Lord is willing to receive them if they take those steps. And so our job is to assist them with that. Merry Christmas, be well, and hope to see you around.